Good evening, and welcome to The Sleepy Scientist. Tonight, we are sinking quietly into the world beneath our feet, exploring a subject that is far more alive and storied than it first appears, the hidden memory of soil. Before we begin, I would love to know where in the world you are listening from. It's always fascinating to see just how far these journeys travel. If you enjoy drifting off with these gentle explorations, a like and a subscribe would mean a great deal, and to those who are already subscribed, thank you. You're helping keep this little corner of calm curiosity alive. And one more favour to ask. Please consider checking out my new channel, The Sleepy Geographer. I'll pop the link in the video description. And don't worry, I'll do my best to make this video soothing rather than sleep-stealing. If it does happen to keep you awake, at least you'll have some new facts about the soil to keep you company in the small hours. So settle in, let your mind wander, and let the story beneath the ground slowly unfold. After all, what secrets does the earth quietly keep, waiting patiently for us to discover? The ground beneath us is more than a surface to stand on. It is a slow and silent witness, layering memory in fragments of stone, grains of pollen, traces of fire, and echoes of life. Each handful of soil is a miniature archive, a record of everything that has touched it, from raindrops that fell thousands of years ago to footsteps pressed by people long forgotten. This video will take us through the many ways soil remembers. We will move from its structure, the layered horizons that act like pages in a diary, to the delicate evidence it preserves, the chemistry of ancient climates, the pollen of vanished forests, the DNA of animals that no longer walk the earth. We will see how soil holds human stories as well, from farming fields to the quiet endurance of dark earth created by forgotten civilizations. Along the way, we will explore how living networks of fungi and microbes keep soil alive, and how seeds can sleep for centuries in its depths, waiting for the right moment to rise again. Soil does not simply record the past, it shapes the present and whispers into the future. By the end of this journey, the ground beneath you may feel less like something ordinary and more like an old friend, holding memories that stretch back far beyond our own. The hidden memory of soil is not just science. It is the story of time itself, written in the earth's quiet hand. Beneath your feet lies one of the thinnest yet most important layers on earth. Soil might seem ordinary, a mixture of brown and grey particles that gathers on shoes and stains knees after a day in the garden, but it's far from simple. Soil is the outer skin of the planet, just a fragile covering that stretches over the continents. Compared to the vastness of mountains or the deep interior of the earth, it is astonishingly thin, usually no more than a few feet before you reach the bedrock beneath. Yet within that shallow layer lies a world teeming with life, chemistry, and memory. Without it, land would be barren stone, unable to support the forests, fields, and communities that we know. Soil begins its life as rock. Over immense spans of time, stone is broken down by wind, rain, ice, and the subtle yet persistent action of roots and microbes. Mountains are worn into grains and pebbles are ground into dust. This process, called weathering, is slow, but it never stops. It takes hundreds, sometimes thousands of years to form even a single inch of healthy topsoil. For something that looks so ordinary, it is one of Earth's most precious and slowly crafted materials. The soil you see today may have taken shape long before the first cities rose or before the first seeds of agriculture were sown. But soil is not only a mineral mixture. Mixed into the ground are the remains of countless living things, fallen leaves, decayed wood, the bodies of insects and animals, even the fine threads of fungi. These organic traces break down and mingle with minerals, creating rich, dark earth capable of supporting new life. In this way, soil is constantly recycling the past, turning what once lived into the foundation for what will live next. It is both cradle and grave, a cycle of endings that become beginnings. To understand how alive soil really is, imagine a single teaspoon of it taken from a healthy meadow. Within that tiny scoop could be billions of microorganisms, bacteria, archaea and fungi, along with microscopic animals and the roots of plants. In fact, more life forms exist in a handful of soil than there are people on the planet. Many of them are invisible to the naked eye, yet together they create an underground metropolis. Some decompose organic matter, some fix nitrogen from the air into forms plants can use, and some build networks that connect the roots of trees, allowing entire forests to share nutrients and information. Soil is not just alive, it is bustling with activity on a scale almost impossible to imagine. The structure of soil plays a vital role in this liveliness. Rather than being a uniform powder, soil is arranged in aggregates, little clusters of mineral grains bound together by organic matter and microbial glues. These clusters create spaces for air and water, making the soil porous. In these tiny gaps, roots can breathe, water can trickle, and microorganisms can thrive. Good soil, then, is not dense or compacted, but full of structure, a balance of solids and spaces. Too much sand, and the soil cannot hold water. Too much clay, and it becomes heavy and suffocating. The healthier soils strike a delicate balance, supporting life above and below the surface. When scientists classify soil, they consider its texture, chemistry, and biology. Sandy soils drain quickly but are poor at retaining nutrients. Clay soils are dense, often rich in minerals, but heavy and difficult for roots to penetrate. Loam, a mixture of sand, silt, and clay with plenty of organic material, is often considered ideal for agriculture. Beyond texture, soils vary in acidity, in the minerals they contain, and in how much carbon they store. Each combination creates a unique habitat, shaping the vegetation and animals that can thrive there. Soil is also dynamic. It breathes, exchanges gases, and cycles nutrients. It absorbs rainfall and releases it slowly, acting as a sponge that moderates floods and droughts. It holds carbon within organic matter, helping regulate the atmosphere. It even produces its own scent. The earthy smell after rain comes from geosmin, a compound released by soil-dwelling bacteria. That familiar aroma is a quiet reminder of the hidden life beneath us. Humans have depended on soil since the beginning of agriculture. The first farmers chose fertile river valleys where annual floods enriched the earth, creating fields that could sustain crops year after year. Civilizations rose where soil was generous and fell where it was exhausted or eroded. Even today, more than 90% of food production depends on soil. Without it, human life on land would be impossible. And yet, despite its importance, this skin of the earth is often overlooked, treated as an afterthought rather than the foundation of terrestrial life. Soil is fragile. It can be eroded by wind and water, stripped by deforestation, or exhausted by over-farming. Because it takes centuries to form, the loss of soil is not something easily repaired. That is why soil scientists often speak of it as a non-renewable resource, at least on human timescales. We may think of stone as ancient and forests as enduring, but it is the soil between them that truly sustains life, and once it is gone, recovery is painfully slow. Beyond its practical importance, there is something quietly poetic about soil. It is at once humble and profound, something brushed off boots without a thought, yet also the very substance that binds together ecosystems and civilizations. To walk across a field is to tread on an invisible world, one that is constantly at work, unseen yet essential. Its thinness makes it seem vulnerable, but its complexity makes it powerful. Thinking of soil as the skin of the earth helps us see it as something living, something that connects the air above with the stone below. Like skin, it protects, breathes, senses, and heals. It carries scars of past events, marks of growth, and traces of memory. To look at soil only as dirt is to miss the vitality and history contained within it. It is more than a material, it is a community, a process, and a record. In the end, soil is not simply what lies underfoot. It is an intricate interface, born of rock and life, shaped over millennia and alive with countless organisms. It is the thin and precious skin of the planet, quietly sustaining everything we see above it. To appreciate soil is to appreciate the delicate balance that allows life to exist on Earth at all. And when viewed in this way, even the most ordinary patch of ground becomes something extraordinary. A reminder that beneath us lies a world that is both fragile and infinite in its importance. When you look at a patch of ground, you only see the surface. Grass, stones, or bare earth seem to be all there is. But if you were to cut down into the soil, you would find a story layered beneath. Soil is not uniform all the way through. Instead, it arranges itself into horizons, distinct bands that differ in colour, texture, and composition. To a trained eye, these layers are like pages in a book, each one telling a different part of the land's history. The very top of the soil is the freshest page. This is the organic horizon, often marked by a dark layer rich with decomposed leaves, roots, and the bodies of small organisms. It is sometimes called the litter layer, because that is what it looks like, a scattering of fallen material. Here, decomposition is at its busiest. Fungi thread through rotting wood, bacteria break down organic matter, and earthworms churn the mix, creating a rich, crumbly texture. This horizon is where new life begins, as seeds germinate and roots reach down in search of nutrients. Beneath that sits the topsoil, technically known as the ahorizon. This is the layer most people think of when they imagine soil. Dark, fertile and alive with organisms. It is a blend of minerals from the rock below and organic matter from the surface above. Because plants root here, and because countless microbes and animals live within it, this horizon is essential for agriculture. The quality of topsoil often determines whether a field can support crops, and its loss through erosion can cripple entire regions. Civilizations have risen and fallen depending on the fate of their air horizon. As you dig deeper, the soil changes. The next layer, the E-horizon, is often lighter in colour and less fertile. It is sometimes called the leaching layer, because water percolates downward through it, carrying with it minerals and nutrients. This process leaves the E-horizon depleted, pale, and sandy. Though not always present in every soil profile, where it exists, it is a stark reminder of how water shapes the ground, redistributing its riches downward. Below that lies the B-horizon, often known as the subsoil. This layer is where the materials leached from above accumulate. Iron, clay, and minerals collect here, sometimes creating striking bands of colour. Rusty reds, yellows, and browns appear as iron oxidizes, giving the subsoil a vibrant look compared to the layers above. While it is not as rich in organic matter as the topsoil, the subsoil plays a critical role in storing nutrients and water, making it important for deeper-rooted plants and trees. Deeper still, the sea horizon marks the transition between soil and the unaltered rock beneath. Here you find weathered fragments, broken pieces of bedrock, and minerals that have only just begun to feel the effects of time and chemistry. It is not a layer of active life, but it is the foundation from which all soil forms. Finally, at the bottom lies the R horizon, solid bedrock. This is the ultimate source material, the parent rock that, over thousands of years, will slowly weather into particles and feed the layers above. These horizons together form the soil profile. Like the chapters of a book, they are ordered, distinct, and deeply informative. A soil scientist examining these layers can learn about the processes that shaped them, how water has moved through the land, what plants have grown there, and even what the climate has been like over centuries. To the untrained eye, the differences may seem subtle, but once you know to look, you can see that soil is not just brown dirt. It is a stratified record of life and time. The colours of these horizons are particularly telling. Dark, rich browns and blacks signal organic matter, the remains of once living things. Pale greys or whites may indicate leaching, where minerals have been washed away. Reds and yellows often reveal the presence of iron oxides, a sign of how water and oxygen have interacted with the soil. Even bluish tints can appear, often in waterlogged soils where oxygen is scarce. These hues are not random, they are the language of soil, written in pigments shaped by chemistry and time. Texture also tells a story. A sandy topsoil drains quickly, leaving plants thirsty, while clay-rich soil can hold water but may suffocate roots. Silty soils, fine and smooth, lie somewhere in between. By feeling a handful of soil between the fingers, one can guess its composition and in turn understand its history. Was this land shaped by glacial grinding, which produces fine particles, or by river deposits, leaving sand and silt in its wake? Each texture is a clue, each grain a fragment of a larger narrative. Beyond colour and texture, soil horizons preserve evidence of events. A layer of charcoal might mark an ancient fire. A sudden deposit of sand could reveal a long-ago flood. Layers of ash may speak of volcanic eruptions, while shifts in colour and texture might hint at centuries of farming or grazing. To dig into the soil profile is to peel back time, to see not only what is happening now but what has unfolded over thousands of years. The profile also reminds us how fragile soil is. The top few inches, the fertile A horizon that sustains most of terrestrial life, can vanish in a single storm if left exposed. Once gone, it takes centuries to rebuild. Beneath our feet is not just dirt, but a precious library, one that erosion can erase far faster than it can be rewritten. Recognizing the soil profile is not only a matter of scientific curiosity, but also of appreciation for something that is finite and irreplaceable. What makes soil profiles especially fascinating is that no two are exactly the same. The soil beneath a rainforest looks very different from that beneath a desert or tundra. In tropical regions, heavy rainfall leaches nutrients quickly, creating profiles that are thick but poor in fertility. In cold northern climates, decomposition is slow, leading to dark, organic, rich horizons that build up over centuries. Grasslands often have some of the deepest, richest topsoils created by endless cycles of growth and decay. Each ecosystem writes its own version of the story, layering pages in different ways. If soil is Earth's skin, then the horizons are its wrinkles, scars and freckles, visible marks of time's passage. They remind us that beneath every step is a record of countless processes working in concert. The slow grind of rock breaking down, the ceaseless work of organisms recycling life, and the gentle persistence of water reshaping minerals. The soil profile may look ordinary to the casual eye, but once examined closely, it becomes a diary written patiently by the earth itself. Thinking of soil in this layered way can change the way we view the ground beneath us. What once seemed flat and featureless becomes a stack of living history, a series of pages that, if read carefully, tell stories stretching back thousands of years. Just as a book is more than its cover, soil is more than its surface. Its horizons invite us to pause, to dig a little deeper, and to realize that the land holds far more than we might first imagine. If soil is the Earth's diary, then dust and sediments are the notes it has scribbled about the weather. The ground beneath us holds more than just the memory of what has grown or died there. It remembers the skies. Every drought, every flood, every shift in wind or rain leaves chemical fingerprints in the soil, quiet traces of the climates that once shaped entire landscapes. By learning to read these traces, scientists can reconstruct the moods of Earth's atmosphere, stretching back thousands, even millions of years. When rain falls, it is not just water seeping into the ground. Raindrops carry dissolved gases and minerals from the air. Over time, patterns of rainfall leave behind chemical markers in the soil. For instance, the ratio of oxygen isotopes within certain soil minerals can indicate how warm or cool the climate was when they formed. A heavier balance of oxygen-18, for example, often reflects colder conditions. It is like finding a thermometer built into the very crystals of the Earth. Dust also plays a role. Carried by wind across continents, fine particles settle into soils and sediments, sometimes travelling thousands of miles. Layers of wind-blown dust known as loess can be found in places like northern China and the American Midwest. These deposits build up slowly, each layer capturing a snapshot of the climate conditions that carried it. Dustier periods usually correspond with drier, windier climates, often linked to ice ages when vegetation was sparse and winds swept freely across barren ground. One of the most remarkable things about soil as a climate record is that it does not just capture local conditions. Because dust can travel globally, a handful of soil can contain fragments of deserts, mountains, and volcanic eruptions from half a world away. In this way, soils become connected archives, showing not just what the weather was like in one place, but how the entire planet was behaving. It is as though Earth left behind postcards from distant lands, all mixed into the local dirt. The chemistry of soils also preserves evidence of rainfall and drought cycles. In arid regions, when water evaporates faster than it falls, salts are left behind in the soil. Over time, these can accumulate into layers called caliche, white crusts of calcium carbonate that mark long dry spells. By contrast, wetter periods tend to leach minerals downward, creating different chemical signatures. The balance of these minerals in soil horizons tells a story of shifting skies, years of plenty, years of scarcity, and everything in between. Volcanic eruptions, too, are recorded in soil. Ash layers settle across the land, rich in unique minerals that serve as unmistakable time markers. These layers can be dated precisely, allowing scientists to tie soil changes to exact events. A dark band of ash in the soil profile may reveal not just a local eruption, but also the way that eruption altered climate for years, cooling the skies and changing rainfall patterns. In frozen regions, permafrost soils hold bubbles of ancient air, small time capsules of the atmosphere from thousands of years ago. Analysing the gases trapped within gives direct evidence of carbon dioxide and methane levels long before humans began measuring them. These frozen soils are not just records of temperature, they're archives of the planet's breath. Even desert soils keep track of shifting climates. In the Sahara, for example, buried soils reveal a time when the region was green, filled with lakes and vegetation. These ancient soils contain fossil pollen from grasses and trees, alongside chemical traces of wetter conditions. The contrast with today's arid sands could not be more dramatic, and yet the memory persists in the earth. The science of reading these records is known as paleopedology, the study of ancient soils. Paleopedologists are detectives of deep time. They take thin sections of soil, polish them under microscopes, and analyse the chemistry, mineralogy, and isotopes within. With these tools, they can reconstruct climates from tens of thousands of years ago, sometimes even hundreds of millions. By piecing together soil records from around the world, they can map the rise and fall of ice ages, the greening and drying of continents, and the pulses of monsoons across millennia. One of the most famous climate records comes from loess deposits in China's Loess Plateau. These thick accumulations of wind-blown dust stretch hundreds of meters deep and preserve a nearly continuous climate record of the last several million years. Alternating layers of loess and soil show cycles of glacial and interglacial periods. The loess layers mark cold, dry, windy conditions, while the soil layers represent warmer, wetter intervals when vegetation flourished. In effect, the plateau is a vast natural archive, its pages stretching back into the dawn of humanity. Closer to home, soils also record the Dust Bowl of the 1930s, when severe drought and poor farming practices in North America led to vast dust storms. The soils from that era show distinct layers of wind-blown silt, a scar in the land that still tells the story of hardship and environmental mismanagement. It is a sobering reminder that the soil's memory is not only of natural changes but also of human choices. Reading ancient climates in soils is not just an academic exercise. These records help scientists predict the future. By understanding how soils captured past droughts, floods, and warming events, researchers can better anticipate how current climate change may unfold. The soil, in its quiet way, is a teacher, showing how ecosystems responded to shifts long before modern instruments existed. There is a poetic quality to this as well. Dust is so easily dismissed as a nuisance, something to sweep away or sneeze at. Yet dust carries within it the story of skies gone by. Every gust of wind, every raindrop, every shift in the sun's warmth leaves a mark that, if we know how to look, endures in the ground. Soil, in this sense, is a memory bank for the atmosphere, a silent witness to the ever-changing dance between earth and sky. Standing on a patch of ground today, you might think only of the present, the grass underfoot, the weather overhead, but beneath that surface is a layered account of climates past, written in dust, salts, and minerals. To hold a fragment of soil is to hold a fragment of history, not just of life and land, but of the air itself. In its chemistry and its sediments, the soil remembers the changing skies, keeping a patient record of every drought and every storm that has ever passed. Scattered across the landscape, invisible to the naked eye, are tiny particles that have outlasted entire civilizations. These are grains of pollen, the microscopic dust produced by plants to reproduce. On a spring day, pollen drifts through the air in vast clouds, coating car windows and setting off sneezes. It seems ephemeral, destined to vanish with the next breeze or rainfall. Yet remarkably, many of these grains survive, settling into soils, lakes and sediments where they can endure for tens of thousands of years. In their shapes and numbers, they preserve detailed diaries of the vegetation that once covered the land. What makes pollen so durable is its outer wall, made of a substance called sporopollenin. This complex organic polymer is one of the toughest materials produced in nature. It resists decay, chemical attack, and even the passage of time. While leaves crumble and wood rots away, pollen grains can persist almost indefinitely, like tiny indestructible beads. Because each plant species produces pollen with a distinctive shape, often decorated with spines, ridges, or pores, scientists can identify them under a microscope with surprising accuracy. Imagine a lake at the edge of a forest. Each year, as trees release pollen into the air, some of it settles onto the water's surface and sinks to the bottom. Layer by layer, the pollen accumulates in the sediment, forming a chronological record. By extracting a core from the lake bed, researchers can peel back this history, 1 millimeter at a time, moving backward through centuries and even millennia. In the deepest layers, they might find pollen from spruce and pine, marking an Ice Age landscape. Higher up, they might discover oak and hazel, signalling a warming climate when broadleaf forests expanded. Near the top, they might see grasses and cereals, evidence of humans clearing forests to grow crops. In this way, a single pollen record can trace the entire ecological journey of a region. Pollen analysis, known as palynology, has revolutionized our understanding of past environments. In northern Europe, cores taken from bogs and lakes reveal the sequence of forest returning after the last ice age. Birch and pine were the pioneers, hardy trees that spread across the tundra as the glaciers retreated. Later came oak, elm, and lime, forming dense woodlands during a warm period about 6,000 years ago. Then, as people began to farm, pollen from cereal crops appeared. Along with a decline in tree pollen, a clear signal of deforestation. The soil and sediments captured all of these changes, silently keeping track of the shifting balance between nature and human activity. Beyond Europe, pollen records have illuminated the rise and fall of civilizations. In Central America, for example, sediments reveal a pattern of forest clearance followed by regrowth. When the Maya civilization thrived, the pollen record shows abundant maize and reduced forest cover. After their decline, trees reclaimed the land, their pollen reappearing in force. This ebb and flow is written more clearly in pollen than in stone ruins. The soil does not simply remember monuments, it remembers the plants that clothed the land and fed its people. One of the most striking uses of pollen records is in tracking climate changes. During the Sahara's green period about 8,000 years ago, pollen preserved in buried soils and lake beds reveals a lush landscape of grasses, trees and lakes. Today that same region is desert, but the pollen shows it was once alive with vegetation, supporting herds of animals and early human communities. Without those microscopic grains, the memory of a green Sahara might have been lost entirely. The detail that pollen provides can be astonishing. Because plants flower at specific times of year, pollen records can even hint at the timing of seasonal changes. For example, shifts in the abundance of certain grasses can indicate whether summers were longer or winters harsher. In ice cores from Greenland and Antarctica, wind-borne pollen reveals what plants were flourishing thousands of kilometers away, carried through the air and deposited onto the frozen surface. The diary of pollen is not confined to one place, it often connects continents. Of course, pollen is not only a gift to science, it has a notorious reputation during allergy season. Millions of people experience itchy eyes, sneezing, and congestion as their immune systems react to harmless pollen grains drifting in the air. It is ironic that the same particles responsible for springtime misery are also the reason we can reconstruct ancient landscapes. The very durability that makes pollen such a nuisance in the present is what makes it such a treasure for understanding the past. Palynologists, the scientists who study pollen, spend hours at microscopes examining samples. To the untrained eye, the grains look like specks, but under magnification they reveal themselves as intricate sculptures. Some are spherical, others oval, some smooth, others bristling with spikes like tiny medieval maces. Each design is a strategy for travel, whether by wind, water or animal. Bees carry pollen dusted onto their bodies, birds and bats move it between flowers, and breezes lift it into the air. However it travels, much of it eventually falls to the ground, where its hard shell ensures it will not be forgotten. These microscopic grains have even been used in forensic investigations. Because different landscapes produce distinctive pollen profiles, a soil sample from a shoe or vehicle can sometimes reveal where a person has been. Courts have admitted pollen evidence in criminal cases, making it not only a tool for understanding prehistory, but also for solving modern mysteries. The pollen diary continues to be written, and even today its entries can be read with careful eyes. There is also something deeply poetic about pollen as memory. Every spring, billions of grains are released into the air, most of them never reaching their intended destination. They are tiny messages from plants, invitations for reproduction scattered on the winds. Yet many of these messages drift into soils and sediments, where they become part of a permanent record. The forest that stood 10,000 years ago is gone, its trunks rotted, its leaves vanished. But its pollen still lies buried, whispering its existence to those who know how to listen. By studying these pollen diaries, we gain a sense not only of environmental change but also of continuity. We see that ecosystems are dynamic, forever shifting with climate and human influence. Yet we also see that plants leave enduring traces, their reproductive dust persisting through ages of ice and heat, through times of abundance and scarcity. Pollen is nature's ink, and soil is its page. Together they write one of the most durable chronicles on Earth. It is humbling to think that the next time a tree releases its pollen into the breeze, some of it may eventually settle into a layer of soil and endure for millennia. A single sneeze in spring could be the faintest echo of a story still being written, one that future scientists may one day uncover. In this way, pollen connects the fleeting with the eternal, the brief flowering of a plant and the long memory of the earth itself. Soil may look silent, but on a microscopic level it hums with fragments of stories far older than any living witness. Every creature that has walked the earth, from towering mammoths to tiny grasses, has left behind a trail of molecules. These fragments, strands of DNA, often fall into the soil, where they can remain long after the body that carried them has vanished. For scientists, this means that dirt is not just a jumble of minerals and organic matter. It is a vast molecular archive, a place where traces of life are filed away, sometimes for tens of thousands of years. DNA, or deoxyribonucleic acid, is the instruction manual of life, coiled into every cell. Normally, when an organism dies, DNA breaks down quickly under the assault of sunlight, water, and microbes. Yet under the right conditions, fragments can persist. Cold, dark, and dry environments are especially good at preserving it. When DNA is absorbed into mineral surfaces like clay, or bound within tiny soil pores, it becomes shielded, sometimes surviving for extraordinary spans of time. While complete genomes are rarely intact, small fragments are often enough to reveal what species once roamed or rooted in a place. This form of evidence is called environmental DNA, or eDNA for short. Unlike fossils, which require bones, shells, or imprints to survive, eDNA can be left behind by something as subtle as a footprint, a tuft of hair, or even the decay of fallen leaves. It is as though every organism signs the guestbook of the soil, even if its visit was brief. Modern sequencing techniques now allow scientists to piece together these scattered fragments, reconstructing ancient environments without a single fossil in sight. One of the most dramatic demonstrations of this came from permafrost soils in Siberia and Canada. In these frozen grounds, DNA has been recovered from animals long extinct, including woolly mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, and giant steppe bison. Even when bones have disappeared, their genetic traces remain. From just a few grams of frozen earth, researchers have identified dozens of species, painting vivid pictures of Ice Age ecosystems. It is astonishing to think that a pinch of soil can hold the memory of entire vanished worlds. Plants also leave their mark in soil DNA. Grasslands that vanished thousands of years ago can still be identified through fragments of chloroplast DNA. In places where forests once stood, the soil still remembers the trees that anchored them. Even aquatic plants are detectable in the sediments of dried lake beds. These traces help scientists understand how ecosystems shifted with climate change, how glaciers advanced and retreated, and how vegetation responded to both natural forces and human activity. The power of soil DNA extends beyond grand stories of mammoths and forests. Microbes, which are far more abundant than large animals, leave behind a constant rain of genetic material. Soil holds a living and dead record of microbial life, from ancient lineages of bacteria to archaea that once thrived in extreme environments. By studying these sequences, scientists gain insight into how microbial communities evolved, how they shaped nutrient cycles, and even how they influenced the development of early ecosystems. This molecular archive has even been used to study human history. At archaeological sites, soil DNA has revealed the presence of people long after their bones had decayed beyond recognition. Footprints in caves and campsites leave enough genetic residue to confirm human occupation, sometimes alongside the DNA of domesticated animals and crops. It is as though the soil itself remembers who camped, farmed, or hunted there, holding traces of daily life that stones and pottery could never show. The techniques for reading soil DNA are sophisticated. Researchers extract soil samples, break open the mineral matrices, and carefully capture the fragile strands of DNA. They then amplify these fragments using a method called polymerase chain reaction, which makes many copies of the genetic material. Sequencing machines can then read the fragments, comparing them to databases of known species. Even when the DNA is broken into small pieces, statistical methods allow scientists to reconstruct which organisms were present. It is a bit like piecing together a shredded manuscript. Individual words may be incomplete, but with enough fragments, the story becomes clear. There is, of course, the problem of contamination. Because DNA is everywhere, drifting in the air, clinging to tools present in modern organisms, Scientists must take great care to ensure they are not reading the present instead of the past. Laboratories handling ancient soil DNA often resemble clean rooms, with strict protocols to prevent stray molecules from sneaking into the samples. The irony is that the soil may faithfully hold the memory of a mammoth for 10,000 years, but the careless sneeze of a researcher could ruin the entire analysis. The insights gained from soil DNA extend into conservation. By studying eDNA in modern soils, researchers can track rare or elusive species without ever seeing them directly. A few strands of DNA in the ground can confirm the presence of a rare frog, a shy carnivore, or even invasive plants before they are noticed by sight. In this way, the molecular memory of soil becomes a powerful tool for protecting biodiversity today. There is something quietly poetic about soil as a genetic library. Every grain may be bound with microscopic threads of information, the last whispers of lives long gone. A mammoth trudging across a snowy plain did not know that its cells, scattered into the frozen ground, would one day be read by humans thousands of years later. A flower dropping its petals into the dust could never imagine that fragments of its DNA would serve as evidence of a climate warmer than today. Soil does not forget. It simply waits for someone patient enough to read its code. The durability of this archive challenges our sense of time. Human memory stretches back only a few generations, and written history covers only a few thousand years. Soil DNA, in contrast, reaches into epochs when continents were still cloaked in ice, and when species now vanished walked the land. To hold a vial of soil from ancient permafrost is to hold not just dirt, but a genetic census of a lost world. It also offers a reminder of how fragile life's record can be. DNA does eventually degrade, and much of it is lost forever. But enough lingers that we can glimpse what came before, a patchwork view that still enriches our understanding of the past. Soil may not preserve entire genomes in pristine condition, but it preserves enough to sketch the outlines of vanished ecosystems, reminding us that what we see today is only one chapter in a far longer book. Thinking of soil as a molecular archive changes the way we view the ground beneath us. It is no longer just a medium for roots and worms, but a storage device of astonishing capacity, each fragment of DNA a line in a vast encyclopedia of life. The challenge, and the wonder, lies in learning to read these lines, to translate the language of molecules into the stories of species. In the end, the soil beneath our feet is more than a foundation. It is a memory bank, a patient recorder of life, death, and transformation. From mammoths to microbes, from crops to wildflowers, all have left their genetic signatures in the earth. To dig into soil DNA is to uncover not just dirt, but the faint echoes of living worlds that would otherwise be lost to time. When people imagine memory, they usually picture a brain, perhaps a library, or even a diary filled with words. Yet the soil beneath us has its own ways of remembering, and some of its most powerful memories are held not in minerals or dust, but in living networks of microbes. Bacteria, fungi, archaea, and other tiny life forms fill the soil in unimaginable numbers. They are not just passive residents. They respond to changes, they adapt, and in doing so they hold on to echoes of the past. The soil's microbial community is a kind of living memory, recording fire, farming, floods, and every disturbance that reshapes the land. Take fire, for instance. A wildfire may sweep across a forest, reducing trees to ash, and heating the soil until it smoulders. To a casual observer, it might seem that everything beneath the flames has been destroyed. Yet within the soil, microbial life carries a hidden resilience. Certain fungi produce heat-resistant spores that can survive temperatures lethal to most organisms. These spores lie dormant until fire clears away competitors, then burst into life, decomposing charred wood and kick-starting the ecosystem's recovery. In this way, microbes remember fire not by recounting it, but by preparing for its return. They shape how the land heals, ensuring that life comes back in a specific sequence. Farmed soils tell a similar story. Repeated ploughing and planting may seem like human impositions, but microbes respond in complex ways. Some bacterial groups thrive in disturbed soils, while others diminish. Over decades, these shifts become imprinted in the microbial community. Even if a field is abandoned and left to regrow into wild vegetation, its microbial legacy often persists. The soil remembers its history of farming, influencing which plants return and how nutrients cycle. A forest regrown on farmland is not the same as one that never experienced the plough. The microbes make sure of that. The memory of disturbance extends to pollution. Heavy metals, pesticides and fertilizers alter the soil microbiome, sometimes in ways that endure for centuries. Bacteria evolve resistance, fungi adapt to new chemical environments, and these changes linger long after the chemicals themselves fade. Scientists can detect these microbial fingerprints and use them to reconstruct the soil's history of stress. In this way, the soil is like a witness, quietly recording what has been poured into it and how life beneath responded. Microbial memory is not only about scars, though. It is also about cooperation and continuity. Mycorrhizal fungi, for example, form networks that connect the roots of plants. These fungal filaments can transfer nutrients, water, and even chemical signals between trees. Some scientists call this the wood wide web. When one tree suffers drought, fungi may relay distress signals to its neighbours, helping them prepare. After a disturbance such as logging or storm damage, these networks can persist underground, carrying the genetic and ecological memory of the old forest into the new one. Even when the surface changes dramatically, the fungal threads below help shape what comes next. In grasslands, microbes store memories of grazing. Hoof prints and manure may vanish quickly to the eye, but the microbial community shifts to reflect the presence of large herbivores. Some bacteria specialize in breaking down the nitrogen-rich waste of animals. Even centuries after grazing animals disappear from a landscape, their influence can linger in the soil's microbial composition. Reintroduce grazing later, and the soil is already primed, as though it had been waiting for the return of its old companions. Floods and droughts are likewise recorded in microbial communities. When soils are waterlogged, oxygen becomes scarce. Microbes that can thrive without oxygen step in, producing gases like methane and nitrous oxide. When the soil dries again, aerobic microbes reclaim their territory. These cycles leave imprints, as certain groups grow or shrink in response. Over time, the microbial profile becomes a fingerprint of how often and how intensely a landscape has faced extremes of wetness and dryness. There is even evidence that microbes can store genetic memory of past challenges. Horizontal gene transfer, a process by which bacteria share genetic material, allows resistance traits and adaptations to persist across generations. If a soil once faced exposure to a pollutant or pathogen, the genes for surviving it may linger in the microbial gene pool long afterward. This makes the soil more resilient when the challenge arises again. It is not conscious memory, of course, but it functions much like one. The past leaves behind a record that prepares for the future. The scale of this microbial archive is staggering. A single gram of healthy soil can contain more than 1 billion bacterial cells and thousands of fungal species. Together, they represent a genetic library far larger than the human genome. A library constantly updated but never fully erased. When scientists sequence soil DNA, they often discover vast numbers of unknown organisms, species with no names, many of which may hold keys to understanding the resilience of ecosystems. It is a reminder that soil memory is not just something we can read, but something still being written, line by line, in microbial code. Some researchers are now exploring how microbial memory could help in restoring damaged environments. By introducing specific fungi or bacteria into degraded soils, it may be possible to rekindle old ecological functions. For example, microbes adapted to fire-prone environments can help restore burned landscapes, while nitrogen-fixing bacteria can jumpstart growth in exhausted farmlands. In this sense, memory is not passive. It is an active tool that can guide recovery if we learn how to listen to it and apply it wisely. There's a gentle irony in all of this. Microbes are among the oldest forms of life on Earth, dating back billions of years, and yet they remain among the least visible to us. They do not build bones or shells that fossilize, but they build memories in the soil, encoded in living communities and genetic adaptations. Without them, soil would not just lose its vitality, it would lose its continuity with the past. The soil's memory would be fragmented and incomplete. It is tempting to think of the ground beneath us as stable, a solid surface we can rely on. Yet at the microbial level, it is in constant flux. Populations rising and falling, exchanging genes, shifting in composition. This ever-changing balance is precisely what allows it to remember. Memory is not about preserving everything unchanged. It is about keeping enough of the past to guide the present. Soil microbes do this with extraordinary skill, quietly recording every fire, every plough, every storm, and every season of calm. There is something profoundly comforting about this. While human memory fades with age, and written records crumble or burn, the soil remembers in ways that endure. It does not tell its stories in words, but in the survival of spores, the presence of resilient genes, and the networks of fungal threads that stretch through the dark. The memory of soil microbes is not stored in books or monuments, but in living resilience, a memory written not in ink but in life itself. So the next time you see a forest regenerate after fire, or a field bloom with wildflowers after years of farming, know that the recovery was not only the work of seeds and sunlight. Beneath the surface, armies of microbes had already prepared the stage, drawing on memories of disturbance and renewal. In their quiet, unseen way, they are the keepers of the soil's living history, ensuring that the story of life continues no matter how often it is interrupted. Fire has always been both a destroyer and a creator. To watch flames sweep through a forest or across a grassland is to witness transformation in its most dramatic form. Trees collapse in showers of sparks. Animals scatter, and the landscape is remade in hours. Yet long after the smoke has cleared and the embers have cooled, the memory of fire lingers in the soil. Charcoal and ash, blackened fragments of wood and mineral-rich dust remain as quiet testimony to the heat that once roared above. The soil does not forget these events. It carries their traces for decades, centuries, sometimes even millennia. Charcoal, though fragile in appearance, is surprisingly durable. It forms when plant material is heated in the absence of enough oxygen to burn completely. Instead of turning to ash and disappearing into smoke, it is carbonized, leaving behind dark, lightweight fragments that resist decay. These bits of charcoal can be buried in soil layers, preserved for thousands of years. Archaeologists and soil scientists often find them when cutting into earth profiles, each black fleck a reminder of a fire that once burned. Because charcoal is stable, it can serve as a permanent bookmark in the soil's diary. Ash tells a different story. Unlike charcoal, it is the residue of combustion fully carried out. It consists of minerals that do not burn, calcium, potassium, magnesium, and other elements concentrated as the organic material vanishes. Ash is lighter and more vulnerable to erosion, but when it settles into soil, it can dramatically change its chemistry. Some ashes make soils more alkaline, altering what plants can grow. Others add nutrients in a sudden flush, fueling bursts of regrowth. To find ash in soil layers is to glimpse both destruction and renewal, a cycle etched into the earth. Scientists use these fire traces to reconstruct ancient events. By analysing the quantity and distribution of charcoal fragments, they can estimate how frequent fires were in a landscape. In some places, layers of soil show regular pulses of charcoal, evidence that wildfires swept through on predictable intervals. In other places, the absence of such layers suggests long gaps without fire. This information reveals not only the history of fire, but also how ecosystems adapted to it. Grasslands, for example, often show frequent charcoal layers, reflecting their dependence on regular burning to maintain open fields. Forest soils might reveal less frequent but more intense fire events. Volcanic eruptions leave even more dramatic soil memories. When a volcano explodes, it rains ash over vast areas, blanketing fields, forests and rivers. These ash layers, known as tephra, are distinctive in composition. Each eruption produces a unique mineral signature, like a geological fingerprint. By matching ash layers in soils across wide regions, scientists can trace the reach of a single eruption and date it precisely. A thin band of volcanic ash in a soil profile is like a timestamp, pinning the events of the past to a calendar. Consider the eruption of Mount Mazama about 7,600 years ago, which created Oregon's Crater Lake. Its ash fell across much of North America, settling into soils thousands of kilometers away. Even today, soil scientists find that pale layer of ash when digging in the right regions, instantly recognizing the signature of that ancient eruption. It is a perfect example of soil as archive. Beneath a farm field or forest floor lies a faint pale reminder of a day when the sky filled with fire. Wildfires, though smaller than volcanic eruptions, also leave chemical footprints in soil. The intense heat can alter the structure of minerals, change how clays hold water, and release nutrients bound in organic matter. After a fire, soils often contain elevated levels of phosphorus and potassium, which can act like a natural fertilizer. This sudden abundance explains why many plants sprout so vigorously after fire, and why certain species are adapted to it. Even seeds can carry memory of fire, with some requiring the heat or smoke of flames to germinate. Soil holds not just the physical remains of fire, but also the ecological consequences encoded in its chemistry. In human history, soils remember the fires people set as well. Charcoal layers often mark the presence of ancient hearths, cooking fires, and land clearing. Long before industrial records, the ground already noted humanity's use of flame. In parts of the Amazon, for instance, soils contain charcoal from fires set thousands of years ago to clear patches of forest for crops. These traces, mingled with the rich dark earth known as Terra Preta, remind us that soil is not only a natural memory but a cultural one too. One fascinating aspect of fire soil memory is its ability to influence recovery. Charcoal acts like a sponge, holding water and nutrients that would otherwise leach away. It can also provide surfaces for microbial life to colonize, supporting the regrowth of ecosystems. In this way, the remnants of fire are not only records but active participants in the rebuilding process. Soil enriched with charcoal is often more fertile than before, a paradoxical gift from destruction. Yet fire memories are not always beneficial. Repeated intense burning can strip soil of organic matter, leaving it less able to hold moisture and more prone to erosion. In some cases, fire creates a hydrophobic layer in the soil, water-repelling compounds formed by the heat coat the particles, causing rain to run off instead of soaking in. These changes can last for years, altering how vegetation returns and how stable the soil remains. The soil remembers not just that a fire happened, but how severe it was, and this memory shapes the landscape for generations. From a broader perspective, charcoal and ash are invaluable to climate science. By examining charcoal records from soils around the world, researchers can map the history of global fire activity. These records reveal how fire frequency has waxed and waned with climate shifts, how humans altered fire regimes, and how ecosystems adapted. The soil's blackened flecks and pale bands become lines in a planetary story, one that links flame, earth, and air. It is humbling to think that beneath a quiet meadow or a suburban backyard might lie evidence of infernos long past. A tiny charcoal fragment in the soil is a survivor of flame, a reminder that landscapes we consider stable have been shaped by fire again and again. Soil does not exaggerate or dramatize these events. It simply holds the record, patiently waiting for someone to notice. There is a certain poetry in this resilience. Fire seems ephemeral. A blaze burns brightly and then is gone, leaving behind only smoke drifting into the sky. Yet its traces endure in the ground, blackened carbon and pale ash woven into the soil's fabric. Fire may consume, but it cannot erase its own memory. The earth keeps it, quiet and unassuming, in layers that persist long after the flames have died. The next time you walk across a stretch of scorched earth or stand at the edge of a dormant volcano, remember that beneath your feet lies a story already written. The soil beneath carries the memory of fire, not in words but in particles, not in photographs but in chemistry. Every charcoal fleck is a fossilized spark, every ash layer a captured plume of smoke. Together they tell a tale of destruction and renewal, of landscapes transformed, and of the Earth's unbroken ability to remember. Wherever humans have lived, the soil has taken note. Long before we had writing or monuments, the ground beneath us was already recording our presence. Agriculture, cities, fires, and waste all leave behind unmistakable signatures. Soil may seem mute, but it remembers the rise of villages, the spread of fields, and the bustle of marketplaces. To an archaeologist or soil scientist, dirt is not just background material, it is an archive of human activity, layered quietly beneath our feet. One of the most profound changes humans ever made to soil was the invention of agriculture. When early farmers tilled the ground, they broke the natural structure of the earth, mixing organic matter with minerals and exposing deeper layers to the surface. They also introduced new plants, leaving behind distinctive pollen grains and seeds. Over time, these repeated disturbances left lasting marks. Ancient fields often reveal plough marks still visible as faint ridges, their patterns preserved in the soil. Even when forests reclaim the land, the chemical traces of cultivation remain. Phosphorus from fertilizers, organic residues from crops, and changes in microbial communities adapted to farmed conditions. Phosphorus is particularly revealing. It is an essential nutrient for plants, and human activity concentrates it in soils. In settlements where people gathered, cooked, and disposed of waste, phosphorus levels often rise dramatically. Thousands of years later, scientists can map out ancient villages and camps simply by testing soil phosphorus. The areas of highest concentration often match places where people lived most intensely, such as near hearths, corrals, or refuse piles. In this way, the ground becomes a map of vanished communities, a silent census of lives once lived. Cities leave even more striking soil signatures. In ancient urban centres, layers of compacted earth, ash, brick fragments, and organic waste accumulate into thick cultural deposits known as middens. These deposits are not just piles of trash, they are stratified records of daily life. Broken pottery, animal bones and seeds mingle with chemical traces of fires and human waste. Modern analysis can detect traces of heavy metals, dyes, and even residues of food and drink. A city may crumble into ruins above ground, but beneath the surface the soil still remembers the meals, crafts, and industries that once flourished there. Roman Britain offers an illustrative example. Archaeologists studying soil in old Roman towns have found elevated levels of lead, a legacy of the empire's plumbing and pottery glazes. Even where the buildings are gone, the soil still carries the chemical echoes of Roman life. Similar patterns emerge worldwide. Medieval tanneries leave behind soils enriched with lime and organic matter. Ancient metallurgists left copper, arsenic, and mercury in the ground. Farmers who burned fields left behind charcoal mixed into the soil. Each activity writes its own chemical entry in the Earth's diary. Waste disposal is another way humans have etched themselves into soil. For millennia, people discarded food scraps, ashes, and organic refuse into pits, or simply onto the ground. Over time, these practices created rich, dark soils that still stand out today. In parts of the Amazon, these human-altered soils are known as Terra Preta, or black earth. They are fertile patches that remain productive thousands of years after the people who created them moved on. The blackened soils are filled with charcoal, bone fragments, and organic matter, transforming otherwise poor tropical soils into lasting agricultural legacies. These soils are living proof that human footprints can persist not just as ruins, but as enriched landscapes. Even less glamorous activities leave their marks. Ancient latrines, for example, enrich soils with organic nitrogen and phosphorus, making them easy to detect centuries later. Sometimes microscopic remains of parasites are preserved, telling us about the diseases that afflicted past populations. It is a reminder that soil remembers not only grand monuments, but also the most ordinary, intimate aspects of daily life. The memory of warfare is also written in soil. Battlefields contain elevated levels of lead from musket balls and bullets, as well as iron from weapons and armour. Burned soils mark the sites of destroyed villages or fortifications. In some cases, mass graves leave behind chemical changes, detectable even when bones have decayed. Soil quietly records these darker chapters of human history, holding on to memories of conflict long after the smoke of war has lifted. What is striking about all these footprints is their persistence. Soil forms slowly, and once something is added, it can remain for centuries. Even subtle activities accumulate into lasting signatures. A few years of farming may leave changes visible thousands of years later. A single volcanic ashfall can preserve human traces in remarkable detail. In effect, the soil is far more reliable than our own memories, holding on to events long after they have faded from human recollection. Modern science is pushing this even further. Techniques like soil micromorphology allow researchers to examine soil thin sections under microscopes, revealing layers of ash, charcoal, and organic matter invisible to the naked eye. Other methods analyze isotopes in soil to determine the sources of organic material, distinguishing between human and animal waste, or between different types of crops. With these tools, archaeologists can reconstruct ancient diets, farming practices, and settlement patterns with astonishing precision. Soil becomes less like a background and more like a witness, telling stories no written record ever could. There is also a sobering aspect to soil memory. Industrial pollution, pesticides, and plastics are now being absorbed into soils worldwide. Just as future scientists can read the traces of Roman plumbing or Maya agriculture, they will one day read the traces of our chemical fertilizers, synthetic compounds, and microplastics. Our own age is inscribing itself deeply into the ground. The Anthropocene, often described as a geological epoch shaped by humans, will be legible not just in rock strata but in the very soils we walk upon. Yet amid all these traces there is resilience. Soils do not simply absorb and preserve, they also recycle and adapt. Microbes break down organic matter, earthworms churn and mix horizons, plants draw nutrients back into life. The soil's memory of human activity is not static, it is dynamic, woven into the processes of decay and renewal. This makes it even more remarkable that so many signatures survive at all. The persistence of phosphorus, charcoal, and heavy metals shows just how deeply human presence has been etched into the earth. There is something humbling in realizing that a footprint on the ground is more than a temporary impression. Beneath that step may lie centuries of human influence, a chemical palimpsest of countless lives. Soil has recorded our stories without bias, capturing both triumphs and mistakes. In its quiet layers, it remembers the first furrows of agriculture, the bustle of cities, the scars of war, and the ordinary rhythms of meals and hearthfires. It is the most democratic of archives, preserving the lives of common people alongside kings and empires. In the end, soil is not just a foundation for human activity, but also its record keeper. Long after our voices fall silent, the ground beneath us will still hold the traces of our presence, from the nutrients of crops to the ash of fires, from the lead of plumbing to the charcoal of land clearing. Every settlement, every farm, Every city has left its mark. Soil remembers it all, patiently, quietly, without judgment. It is the Earth's enduring memory of us. In the heart of the Amazon rainforest lies a puzzle that has fascinated scientists, archaeologists, and farmers alike. Amid soils that are famously poor and easily exhausted, there are patches of earth that defy the rule. These soils are darker, richer, and astonishingly fertile, supporting crops year after year without losing their vigour. Known as Terra Preta, or dark earth, they stretch across scattered sites of the Amazon basin, forming a patchwork of human-made fertility. Their existence raises a remarkable question. How did ancient people transform some of the most nutrient-poor soils on Earth into ones that still thrive thousands of years later? The Amazon's natural soils, called oxysols, are typically red or yellow, deeply weathered, and low in nutrients. Heavy rainfall leaches minerals downward, leaving behind little to sustain crops. Farmers who attempt to grow food in these soils without modern fertilizers often see yields collapse after just a few years. It was long assumed that large-scale societies could never have flourished in such an environment. Yet the discovery of Terra Preta tells another story, one in which ancient people found a way to engineer soil that could sustain them indefinitely. Terra Preta is striking to see. Its black colour comes from an abundance of charcoal mixed into the soil, giving it a rich, dark hue that stands out sharply from the surrounding reddish earth. Farmers who work these soils today still recognise them instantly, and they value them highly for their fertility. Unlike the thin and fragile oxysols around them, Terra Preta can produce healthy harvests of maize, cassava, and other crops year after year. This longevity is not natural. It is the result of careful human intervention. At the core of Terra Preta is charcoal, often referred to in this context as biochar. Ancient Amazonians appear to have intentionally added it to the soil by burning organic material in controlled low-oxygen fires. Instead of letting wood and plant matter burn completely to ash, they smouldered it into charcoal. Mixed into the soil, this carbonized material resists decomposition and remains stable for thousands of years. More importantly, it provides a matrix of pores and surfaces that hold nutrients, water, and microbial life. Charcoal turns soil into a sponge that captures fertility instead of letting it wash away. But charcoal alone was not the secret. Alongside it, the people of the Amazon added organic waste, food scraps, plant matter, fish bones, and even human waste. These inputs provided a steady supply of nutrients, from nitrogen and phosphorus to calcium and potassium. Combined with charcoal, they created a soil that did not just store fertility, but built on it, forming a stable and self-sustaining system. In effect, Terra Preta is a composting strategy written into the earth itself. The microbial community of Terra Preta also plays a key role. Studies show that these soils harbour diverse and abundant microbial life, much richer than the surrounding oxysols. The charcoal provides habitat for microbes, shielding them from environmental stresses and giving them surfaces to colonize. In return, these microbes break down organic matter, release nutrients, and contribute to the soil's fertility. This microbial activity has been maintained for centuries, making Terra Preta a living memory of the people who created it. What is remarkable is not just the fertility of Terra Preta, but its persistence. Many patches are more than 2,000 years old, yet they are still productive today. Farmers who cultivate them often notice that the soil seems to regenerate itself, maintaining nutrient levels far longer than ordinary soils. The very fact that Terra Preta continues to support crops is a testament to its design. It is as though ancient farmers discovered a recipe for soil immortality. The scale of these soils also challenges assumptions about the Amazon's past. For much of the 20th century, the rainforest was thought to be sparsely populated before European contact, home only to small scattered groups. But the widespread presence of Terra Preta suggests otherwise. Large communities must have been involved in its creation, systematically enriching soils across vast areas. Some estimates suggest that as much as 10% of the Amazon basin may be covered by these dark earths, hinting at a landscape once carefully managed and densely inhabited. Far from being an untouched wilderness, the Amazon may have been a garden, cultivated by people who understood and worked with its rhythms. The story of Terra Preta also has modern echoes. Scientists and environmentalists are studying biochar, inspired by the Amazonian method, as a tool for sustainable agriculture and carbon storage. By adding charcoal to soils today, farmers can improve fertility, reduce fertilizer use, and even lock carbon away for centuries, helping mitigate climate change. In this way, the wisdom of ancient Amazonians might hold lessons for addressing some of the most pressing environmental challenges of our time. There is a poetic element to Terra Preta's endurance. While stone monuments crumble and wooden structures decay, these soils remain, quietly bearing witness to the ingenuity of their makers. The people who enriched the earth in this way may not have left behind sprawling cities of stone, but they left something perhaps more profound, living landscapes that continue to nourish life long after their creators are gone. Terra Preta is less a ruin than a legacy, one that farmers still benefit from today. Walking across a patch of Terra Preta, one is literally standing on human history made fertile. Every shovel of dark earth carries within it the fingerprints of ancient cooks, tending hearth fires, farmers spreading waste, and families discarding scraps. These ordinary activities, repeated over generations, built a soil that outlived them all. It is a reminder that memory does not always need to be carved into stone. Sometimes it can be cultivated in the very ground, a memory written in carbon and nutrients rather than words. The existence of Terra Preta invites us to rethink the relationship between people and soil. Instead of merely depleting the earth, these communities enhanced it, creating abundance in a place where nature alone offered little. They demonstrate that humans are not only capable of degrading their environments, but also of improving them in ways that endure for millennia. It is a lesson of humility and hope. The soil remembers us, and with care it can remember us kindly. In the end, Terra Preta is more than just fertile soil. It is proof that human beings have always been engineers of the earth, shaping it not only to survive but to flourish. It stands as one of the most enduring testaments of human creativity, hidden not in temples or statues, but in the quiet richness of dark soil. Thousands of years later, the Amazon's black earth continues to feed life, carrying forward the memory of the people who made it, one grain at a time. Soil is more than chemistry and biology. For as long as humans have told stories, the ground beneath us has been a source of meaning, a stage for ritual, and a symbol of life itself. We plant seeds in it, we bury our dead in it, and we draw metaphors from it. While science shows us how soil holds the physical memories of fire, water, and DNA, culture reveals how soil has held our imagination. In every corner of the world, the earth beneath our feet has been revered, feared, and celebrated as something sacred. Many creation myths begin with soil or clay. In Mesopotamian stories, the god Enki shaped humans from clay, mixed with the blood of a slain deity, giving life to soil and in turn giving soil life to us. In ancient Greece, Prometheus was said to have fashioned the first people from clay, and the goddess Gaia embodied the fertile ground itself. Across the world in China, myths describe the goddess Nuwa moulding humans from yellow clay, giving them shape and spirit. Soil in these stories was not inert matter, but the very fabric from which life was crafted. The idea that we come from earth and return to it is a theme so widespread it is nearly universal. Burial practices show another way that cultures have connected with soil. To bury someone in the ground is to return them to the earth, a gesture of closure but also of continuity. In ancient Egypt, the fertile black silt of the Nile was associated with rebirth, so burials were often linked to the hope of renewal. In many indigenous traditions of North America, Earth is described as a motherly figure who receives the dead with care, making soil both grave and womb. Even today, the act of burial carries symbolic weight, affirming a cycle of life, death, and regeneration that soil represents so perfectly. Soil has also long been tied to fertility rituals. In some farming societies, handfuls of sacred soil were scattered onto fields to ensure good harvests. In India, the festival of Holi includes rituals using earth and ash, celebrating renewal and the fertility of the land. In parts of Africa, ceremonies involve smearing soil on the body as a blessing, a way of binding people to the fertility of their environment. The logic is simple but profound. The same ground that grows crops can also nourish human life, and by ritually connecting with it, communities hope to share in its abundance. There are also traditions where soil serves as witness. In medieval Europe, oaths were sometimes sworn while holding a clod of earth, symbolizing the weight of the land and one's connection to it. In Japan, soil from battlefields was gathered to honor fallen warriors, linking their sacrifice to the earth itself. Even today, soil is carried from homelands by migrants, tucked into pouches or jars, as a way of keeping memory alive. To hold soil from home is to hold a piece of identity, a tangible reminder of roots both literal and metaphorical. The sacred status of soil is especially clear in agriculture. The first farmers did not simply see soil as a medium for plants, they saw it as a living presence that needed care and respect. Many agricultural calendars were tied to rituals of blessing the earth before planting and after harvest. Roman religion included the goddess Tellus, who personified the fertile ground. In Andean cultures, Pachamama, the Earth Mother, was honoured with offerings of food and drink poured directly into the soil. These practices reveal a deep intuition. To take from the earth is also to give back, maintaining balance with a ground that remembers generosity and neglect alike. Even in modern times, echoes of soil's cultural memory persist. Expressions such as down to earth, grounded, or the salt of the earth reflect the association of soil with honesty, humility, and reliability. To be rooted somewhere is to belong deeply, just as plants belong to the ground that supports them. Soil shapes our language as much as it shapes our crops, embedding itself in the metaphors we use every day. There are also darker aspects of soil's cultural memory. In places scarred by war or tragedy, the soil itself is seen as stained. After battles, survivors have described the ground as haunted, holding the memory of blood spilled upon it. In folklore, restless spirits sometimes dwell in the soil of disturbed graves. These associations remind us that the ground is not only linked to life and fertility, but also to suffering and death. Soil, in cultural imagination, carries both the light and the shadow of human experience. Archaeological sites show how soil was deliberately used in symbolic ways. Mounds built by indigenous peoples of North America often incorporated specific soils carried from distant places, chosen for their colour or fertility. In parts of Europe, ceremonial sites include layers of chalk or clay brought in from afar, as if the soil itself was a participant in the ritual. These deliberate choices suggest that soil was not just background, but an active material imbued with meaning. What makes all of this so striking is how soil has remained central to cultural life across such different times and places. Whether it is the black silt of the Nile, the red clay of Africa, the yellow earth of China, or the dark loam of Europe's farmlands, the ground has always been more than a physical foundation. It is a repository of stories, myths, and rituals, a symbol of both permanence and transformation. Even science, with its cool precision, sometimes mirrors these cultural understandings. To say soil has memory is to borrow the same metaphor used in myth, the earth as a being that remembers. While scientists mean this in terms of chemical records and microbial resilience, the resonance with cultural story shows how deeply this idea runs. Humans have always intuited that the ground remembers, whether in the fertility of crops or in the persistence of ancestral presence. There is something profoundly grounding, in every sense of the word, about realizing that soil is as much cultural as it is scientific. To walk across a field or through a forest is not only to tread on a natural surface, but also to pass over centuries of stories, beliefs, and rituals. Soil is both archive and altar, both record and symbol. In the end, the cultural memory of soil reminds us that the earth beneath us has always been more than dirt. It has been a teacher, a companion, a witness, and a sacred presence. It has inspired myths of creation, carried the weight of burials, blessed harvests, and grounded our metaphors. Soil is not only alive with organisms and chemicals, it is alive with meaning. To recognize this is to see that memory does not just live in libraries or in human minds. It lives beneath our feet, in the humble yet enduring ground we so often take for granted. When the last ice age began to loosen its grip, vast glaciers that had ground across continents began their slow retreat. For thousands of years, ice had dominated the land, scouring valleys, crushing mountainsides, and leaving little more than bare rock in its wake. When the climate warmed and the glaciers melted back, they revealed landscapes that were raw, scraped clean, and seemingly lifeless. Yet from this blank canvas, soils slowly began to form, and with them came the rebirth of ecosystems. Today, the soils left behind by the ice still carry the story of that transformation. Glaciers are powerful agents of change. As they advance, they pick up rocks and grind them into fine powder, a material known as glacial flour. When they retreat, they leave this material behind, spread across plains or piled in ridges called moraines. At first, this debris is barren. It is little more than crushed stone, lacking organic matter and microbial life. But over time, the forces of weathering and biology get to work. Rain and wind break particles further, frost shatters boulders, and the first pioneers of life begin to arrive. Soil is born not in a sudden burst, but in slow, patient increments, layer by layer. The earliest colonizers of these fresh glacial landscapes are often lichens and mosses. Lichens, with their remarkable ability to cling to bare rock, secrete acids that help dissolve minerals, freeing nutrients. Mosses hold water, creating damp microhabitats where tiny organisms can thrive. When these pioneers die, their remains add organic matter to the mineral mix. This thin layer of proto-soil, fragile and shallow, is the first step towards something more complex. It may not look like much, but it is the foundation on which entire ecosystems are eventually built. As soils begin to accumulate, microbial life flourishes. Bacteria and fungi break down organic debris, cycling nutrients and enriching the ground. Their activity transforms sterile glacial deposits into living soil. Over centuries, this process allows grasses, shrubs, and eventually trees to take root. Forests that now cover much of the northern hemisphere owe their existence to this patient work. Without the slow accumulation of soil after the ice, those forests would have had no foundation in which to grow. The soils formed in glacial landscapes are distinctive. They often contain a mix of particle sizes, from fine silt to coarse gravel, reflecting the chaotic way glaciers deposit material. They're usually young in geological terms, with only a thin horizon sequence compared to older soils. Yet within their composition, scientists can still trace the fingerprints of ice. Layers of unsorted rock fragments, known as till, mark the direct deposits of glaciers. Varves, thin annual layers of silt and clay left in glacial lakes, record seasonal meltwater pulses, each layer like a yearly entry in the climate diary. These deposits, once buried within soil profiles, give clear evidence of the ice's presence and its gradual retreat. One of the most fascinating aspects of post-glacial soils is their role in carbon storage. As vegetation colonized the freshly exposed land, carbon from the atmosphere was locked into organic matter in the soil. This process helped regulate climate, contributing to the stability of the Holocene. the epoch in which human civilization emerged. Even now, soils in formerly glaciated regions hold vast amounts of carbon, a legacy of the Ice Age recovery. They are living records not only of past climates, but also of the Earth's ability to balance itself after upheaval. Permafrost soils tell another chapter of this story. In the far north, where glaciers once dominated, frozen soils preserve organic material that was buried during the Ice Age. As long as the ground remains frozen, this material stays locked away, a frozen memory of ecosystems that existed tens of thousands of years ago. But as permafrost thaws with modern warming, these ancient soils release their contents, reintroducing carbon into the atmosphere. In this way, the legacy of Ice Age soils continues to shape the climate of today. The rebirth of ecosystems after ice is also remembered in the pollen and seeds preserved in soils. As forests expanded northward after the glaciers receded, pollen grains settled into the forming soils, leaving behind a record of which plants colonized first and how vegetation shifted over time. In many places, the earliest trees were birches and willows, species that tolerate poor young soils. Later came oaks, pines, and other trees that built denser forests. Soil cores taken from former glacial landscapes reveal these transitions with remarkable clarity, showing how the ground kept track of the return of life. Human history is tied closely to these post-glacial soils. The fertile plains of northern Europe formed from glacial deposits became the breadbasket of early agriculture. The American Midwest, enriched by thick layers of glacial loess, grew into one of the most productive farming regions in the world. Even the black soils of Ukraine owe their richness to glacial legacies. Where ice once scoured the land, it also left behind the raw material for human flourishing. Soil, in remembering the ice, became a foundation for civilization. There is a striking beauty in this story of renewal. The same ice that stripped the land bare also set the stage for abundance. The soil that formed in its wake carries scars of grinding glaciers and deposits of ancient floods, yet it also carries the nutrients that allow forests, grasslands, and farms to thrive. To read soil profiles in glaciated regions is to see both devastation and recovery written side by side, destruction giving way to resilience. The lesson of soil after the ice is one of patience. Ecosystems do not spring back overnight. It can take centuries for soils to develop enough depth and fertility to sustain diverse communities, but given time, even the harshest landscapes can be transformed. The ground beneath us today, whether under a forest or a field, may once have been scraped raw by ice. The fact that it now supports such richness is a quiet reminder of nature's ability to rebuild, grain by grain, layer by layer. In the end, the soils left behind by glaciers are not just geological leftovers. They are chronicles of change, telling of cold ages and warm recoveries, of destruction and rebirth. They remind us that the land has endured vast transformations before and has carried the memory of them in its very fabric. To walk across the soils of once glaciated regions is to walk across pages of Earth's diary, where the story of ice and renewal is written in every particle. Soil may not look like much of a witness. It cannot speak, it cannot point, and it cannot take the stand in a courtroom. Yet in its own quiet way, soil is one of the most reliable record keepers we have. Every patch of ground is unique, shaped by its chemistry, its mineralogy, and its living inhabitants. This uniqueness makes soil a kind of fingerprint, one that clings to shoes, tools, and even clothing. Modern science has learned how to read these traces, turning the dirt beneath our feet into a powerful tool for solving crimes, reconstructing history, and tracking movement across landscapes. The idea of using soil as evidence is not new. Even in the 19th century, forensic pioneers noticed that mud or dust carried on boots could match a suspect to a location. In 1904, the Austrian criminalist Hans Gross described soil as an underappreciated but invaluable form of trace evidence. Later, the famed investigator Edmond Locard whose principle that every contact leaves a trace is a cornerstone of forensic science, emphasized the value of soil in linking people to places. While fibers, fingerprints, and blood might draw more attention, soil has been quietly solving mysteries for more than a century. One of the reasons soil is so useful in investigations is its sheer variety. Even within a small area, soils can differ in texture, colour, and mineral content. One patch might be sandy, another clay-rich, another speckled with microscopic quartz grains. Some soils carry distinctive chemical signatures, such as high levels of phosphorus from fertilizers or unusual mineral compositions tied to local geology. Under a microscope, soil particles reveal unique shapes and structures. Add in pollen grains, fungal spores, and even fragments of DNA, and each soil sample becomes a complex and individual mixture. Forensic scientists can compare these mixtures across samples to determine whether two soils share the same origin. There have been famous cases where soil made the difference. In 1959, soil evidence helped convict the British serial killer John Bodkin Adams, as soil on his car tyres matched the ground where a body was buried. In more recent years, advances in geochemical analysis have allowed investigators to trace soil with astonishing precision. Isotope ratios, for example, can identify soils formed under specific climate conditions. Even microscopic magnetic particles in soil, shaped by local rocks or industrial processes, can serve as unique markers. What once seemed like generic dirt is now understood as a highly specific record of place. Archaeology has long relied on this detective work. Excavated soils reveal not just the presence of artifacts, but the chemical context of human life. Elevated phosphorus often marks ancient hearths or middens, while microscopic charcoal indicates long-ago fires. Layers of compacted soil may reveal pathways or floors where countless feet once walked. By reading soils carefully, archaeologists can reconstruct the daily rhythms of people who lived thousands of years ago, even when no stone walls remain. In some cases, soil analysis has revealed the diets of ancient communities, showing which plants were grown and which animals were kept nearby. Forensic soil science extends even to war crimes investigations. In places where mass graves have been hidden, soil can help locate them. Disturbed soils carry physical and chemical signals, altered compaction, unusual organic residues, or distinct microbial communities. By surveying soils, investigators can identify suspicious patches that might conceal human remains. Once uncovered, the soil itself can sometimes yield DNA fragments, linking the site to individuals. In this way, soil serves both as witness and evidence, helping bring closure to families and accountability to history. Tracking movement is another powerful application. Soil clings stubbornly to shoes, tyres, and clothing, often in tiny amounts invisible to the eye. Yet even a trace can be enough to reveal where someone has been. Pollen embedded in soil can show whether a shoe passed through a meadow or a forest. Microbial communities can indicate whether soil came from a farm, a wetland, or an urban park. In legal cases, comparing soil from a suspect's belongings to soil from a crime scene can provide compelling links. In border security and anti-smuggling operations, soil traces have even been used to identify where shipments originated, helping to trace illegal goods back to their sources. This detective role is not confined to human crimes. Ecologists use soil evidence to track the spread of invasive species. By analysing DNA in soils, scientists can detect the presence of plants or animals long before they are visible. Soil also helps trace the movement of livestock, the origins of crops, and the pathways of diseases. In a sense, the soil's memory acts as a silent surveillance system, recording biological comings and goings that might otherwise escape notice. What makes forensic soil analysis especially fascinating is how it blends so many disciplines. Geology, chemistry, biology, and even atmospheric science come together in the study of a single soil sample. Scientists might examine the mineral crystals under polarized light, run chemical tests to measure trace elements, and sequence DNA fragments to identify species. Each line of evidence adds another clue, another layer of memory. Together they create a profile that can connect a handful of dirt to a specific place with remarkable certainty. Despite its reliability, soil evidence has had to overcome skepticism. In the courtroom, dramatic evidence like fingerprints or DNA from blood often overshadows soil analysis. Yet as methods grow more precise and standardized, soil is gaining recognition as robust forensic evidence. In some countries, soil scientists now work closely with law enforcement, collecting and analyzing samples to build cases. The humble handful of earth has proven itself capable of carrying enormous weight in matters of justice. There is also a philosophical elegance to the idea. When a person walks across a field or down a road, they leave behind traces, not only footprints, but also tiny particles of earth that cling to them. They take part of the place with them, whether they notice it or not. Soil in this way embodies the principle that no action is without record. Every movement leaves a signature, every contact leaves a trace. The earth remembers, even when people try to forget. Beyond its practical applications, forensic soil science underscores the richness of the ground beneath us. What appears to be dust on a shoe can hold a library of information. Minerals born of ancient rocks, pollen from local plants, microbes adapted to specific conditions, even fragments of human activity from centuries past. Each speck is a layered story, one that can reveal the truth in matters of life, death, and justice. Soil as detective's memory is a reminder that the earth is never inert. It listens, it absorbs, and it preserves. It does not judge, but it does not forget. Whether uncovering the daily routines of ancient peoples, solving modern crimes, or tracing the spread of life across the globe, soil quietly testifies to where we have been and what we have done. It is the silent witness beneath our feet, ready to reveal its secrets to those who know how to ask. To look at the surface of the ground, you might think it tells only of the present moment, grass growing, roots spreading, insects burrowing. But if you drill down into the soil, you quickly discover that it is layered not only in space, but also in time. Each horizon is like a page, and together they form a diary that stretches back thousands of years. With the right tools, soil can act as a time machine, allowing scientists to travel into the past, reconstructing ancient climates, ecosystems, and even moments of human history. The main key to unlocking this time machine is the soil core. Scientists extract a column of earth using long, hollow tubes, pulling up intact cylinders that preserve the layers in order. Each centimetre of depth represents a step further back in time. At the surface, you find traces of modern life, pollen from today's plants, residues of industrial pollution, the signature of human agriculture. Digging deeper, the story shifts. You might encounter layers of ash from a volcanic eruption centuries ago, or a band of charcoal that marks a wildfire long extinguished. Deeper still, you reach soils formed under ancient forests or grasslands, their chemistry still holding the memory of vanished landscapes. What makes these cores so valuable is that they provide a continuous record. Unlike a single artifact or isolated fossil, a soil core preserves sequences, showing change over time. By studying patterns in pollen, dust, carbon, and isotopes, scientists can see how ecosystems evolved year after year, century after century. It is like having a film reel of the past, though the images are written in grains and molecules rather than photographs. Radiocarbon dating adds another dimension to this time travel. Living organisms take in carbon from the atmosphere, including a rare isotope called carbon-14. When they die, they stop absorbing it, and the carbon-14 slowly decays at a predictable rate. By measuring how much remains in organic material, a fragment of charcoal, a bit of bone, a seed buried in soil, scientists can calculate when it was deposited. Radiocarbon dating has revolutionized archaeology and paleoclimatology, giving us precise timelines for the events recorded in soil. A core might tell you that a wildfire occurred. Radiocarbon dating can tell you it happened about 5,000 years ago. Other isotopes tell different stories. Beryllium-10, for example, forms in the atmosphere when cosmic rays strike oxygen and nitrogen. It settles into soils and sediments, where its concentration can reflect changes in solar activity and atmospheric circulation. Lead isotopes can reveal the onset of human mining and metalworking, while nitrogen isotopes can indicate the intensity of farming. Each element is like a different dial on the time machine, offering a unique perspective on the past. One of the most vivid examples of soil's time-travelling ability comes from varves, annual layers of silt and clay deposited in glacial lakes. These layers are as precise as tree rings, with each pair of dark and light bands marking a single year. By counting varves and analysing their composition, scientists can reconstruct year-by-year records of climate and environment, stretching back tens of thousands of years. Soil, in this sense, is more than a diary, it is a calendar. Core samples from peat bogs are another treasure trove. Peat accumulates slowly as plants grow and decay in waterlogged conditions. Because decomposition is incomplete, layers of organic matter build up, trapping pollen, seeds, insects, and even ancient tools lost by humans. In some bogs, the record stretches back more than 10,000 years. These cores tell of forests expanding and retreating, of farming appearing, of fires sweeping through, and of shifts in rainfall. They also preserve startling human traces, like bog bodies, naturally mummified individuals whose last moments were sealed in the peat. In these cases, soil does not just act as time machine, but as guardian of history. Sediment cores from lakes and floodplains offer equally detailed journeys. In their layers, you can see droughts recorded in cracked mud, floods remembered in coarse sand deposits, and agricultural expansion revealed in sudden increases of crop pollen. In some cases, the introduction of exotic species can be tracked as their pollen first appears, a signal of human contact and global trade. Soil becomes an archive not only of natural change but of human influence, its time machine transporting us through the intertwined stories of nature and culture. Of course, soil does not preserve everything equally. Some records fade with time, especially in highly active or disturbed soils. Microbes break down organic matter, water mixes layers, and erosion removes chunks of history. Yet even with these losses, soil often retains enough memory to paint a vivid picture of the past. The very imperfections become part of the story, showing where lands were eroded, buried, or transformed. A missing layer can be as telling as a preserved one, hinting at floods, landslides, or human disturbance. This ability to travel through time is not limited to distant prehistory. Soil cores taken near industrial sites clearly record the modern era, with sudden increases in lead during the age of gasoline, spikes of radioactive isotopes after mid-20th century nuclear testing, and traces of plastics in the most recent layers. Future scientists will no doubt read these signals as markers of our age, just as we now read the ashes of volcanoes or the pollen of vanished forests. Soil's time machine has no preference for heroes or villains. It records it all with impartial patience. There is a certain wonder in the idea that the ground beneath your feet is a timeline in waiting. The top few inches tell of the present, but each step deeper carries you further into the past. To hold a soil core in your hands is to hold centuries of rain, fire, growth, and decay compressed into a slender column. Every band of colour, every fleck of charcoal, every shift in texture is a moment preserved, a memory waiting to be interpreted. It may not be a time machine in the sense of whirring gears or flashing lights, but soil offers something perhaps more remarkable. A quiet, reliable passage into the past, one that does not require science fiction. With a corer, a microscope, and a radiocarbon lab, we can travel back to the days of mammoths, the dawn of agriculture, or the first cities. The journey requires patience, but the reward is knowledge, the ability to see how landscapes have changed and to understand how our own time fits within that broader story. In this sense, the soil's time machine is not only about looking backward. By understanding how climates shifted, how ecosystems adapted, and how humans altered the land, we gain clues about what might come next. The past and future are connected, and the soil is the bridge between them. To read the ground beneath us is to journey through time, a journey that reveals not only what has been, but also what may yet be written in the layers still forming today. Water shapes soil more than any other force. Every drop that falls, every river that floods its banks, every season of drought leaves an imprint that endures long after the weather has passed. The ground beneath us remembers these wet and dry rhythms, holding on to them in its layers, its chemistry and its structure. To read soil is to read the memory of water, a record that explains not just landscapes, but also the fortunes of civilizations. Floods are among the most dramatic events that soils record. When rivers overflow, they spread sediments across floodplains, layering fine silts and clays over the land. Over centuries, these deposits build fertile soils that sustain agriculture. The Nile River's annual flood, for example, left behind a black silt so rich that ancient Egyptians called their land Kemet, the Black Land. The soil carried the memory of each flood in fine layers, each season building on the last. Without this gift of sediment, Egyptian civilization could not have flourished in the desert. Even today, buried soils in the Nile Valley preserve the signatures of ancient floods, silent confirmation of the river's timeless cycles. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers in Mesopotamia tell a similar story, though with a more complex ending. Their floods deposited fertile silts that supported the first cities and empires, but unlike the predictable Nile, Mesopotamian floods could be violent and erratic, leaving behind layers of coarse sands as well as fine silts. Archaeologists excavating ancient sites have found abrupt soil layers that reveal catastrophic floods, events that may have inspired flood myths passed down through generations. The same floods that nourished life could also sweep it away, and the soils preserved both sides of that history. Soils also keep track of drought, often in subtle but unmistakable ways. When water is scarce, salts accumulate as evaporation leaves minerals behind. Layers of caliche, hardened crusts of calcium carbonate, mark prolonged dry periods. In some cases, soil horizons show alternating bands of fertility and desiccation, a diary of shifting rainfall over centuries. These chemical signatures help scientists reconstruct not only ancient climates, but also the rise and fall of societies that depended on water. The story of the Maya in Central America is one of the clearest examples. For centuries, the Maya cultivated maize, beans and squash in fertile lowland soils. But soil studies reveal evidence of prolonged droughts in the 9th century, with hardened surfaces and chemical residues pointing to years of dryness. Pollen records show declining forest cover, suggesting desperate attempts to expand farmland as crops failed. Eventually, many Maya cities were abandoned. The soils carry the memory of these dry years, offering insight into how climate and water shaped the trajectory of a great civilization. In China's loose plateau, thick deposits of wind-blown dust have been shaped and enriched by periodic floods. Here too, soil layers reveal alternating wet and dry cycles. Some layers show strong development of soil horizons, evidence of wetter, stable conditions when vegetation thrived. Others are little more than loose dust, deposited during dry, windy periods. By reading these sequences, scientists can trace the waxing and waning of monsoons over tens of thousands of years. These records align with the flourishing and decline of dynasties, linking human history to the soil's memory of rainfall. Water's memory in soils is not only about abundance or absence. The chemical isotopes within soil carbonates also reveal rainfall patterns. Ratios of oxygen isotopes in these minerals reflect the sources and intensity of precipitation. By analysing such signatures, researchers can reconstruct ancient climates with surprising precision. Soil does not only recall that it was once wet or dry, it remembers the very character of the water that passed through it. The Andes provide another striking case. Terraced fields built by the Inca and their predecessors relied on soils that captured and stored seasonal rains. Archaeologists studying Andean soils find layers enriched by irrigation channels and signs of deliberate management, yet they also find evidence of droughts, recorded in horizons hardened by salts and mineral crusts. These cycles remind us that even the most advanced agricultural systems depended on water's reliability, and that soils still carry the history of their success and struggle. Closer to modern times, soils across the American Midwest recall the Dust Bowl of the 1930s. Years of drought, compounded by unsustainable farming practices, left soils dry and loose. Winds carried topsoil away, creating layers of deposited dust visible across the region. Soil profiles today still bear the scars of that era. Truncated horizons, lost organic matter, and thin deposits of airborne silt marking the years when fields quite literally blew away. These traces are a warning as much as a memory, a reminder of how human choices and water's absence can combine to reshape landscapes. Volcanic soils also preserve dramatic water memories. After eruptions, rains wash ash into valleys, creating lahar deposits, thick, muddy flows that bury soils under new layers. Over time, these layers harden into distinct horizons, sharp lines in the soil's record that tell of moments when water and fire collided. Such deposits often coincide with disruptions in human settlement, recorded not only in archaeology, but also in the land itself. What makes water's memory in soil especially important is its role in human survival. Societies have always relied on fertile floodplains, irrigation systems, and reliable rainfall. When water behaved predictably, civilizations thrived. When it shifted, soils kept the evidence of how communities adapted or collapsed. The soil beneath ancient Mesopotamian cities, Mayan temples, and Incan terraces all bear witness to this delicate relationship. Modern science continues to read these memories to prepare for the future. Soil cores taken from floodplains reveal the frequency of ancient floods, offering insights into the risks faced by today's river cities. Salts preserved in arid soils show the severity of past droughts, helping predict how climate change might alter rainfall. By listening to the soil's record, we gain a long-term perspective on water's rhythms, far beyond the reach of written history. There is also a poetic side to this memory. Water is fluid, fleeting, impossible to grasp for long. It flows, evaporates, and disappears into clouds. Yet soil, patient and grounded, holds onto water's traces, transforming something ephemeral into something enduring. Floods that roared centuries ago are still visible in sediment layers. Droughts that withered crops 1,000 years past are still etched in mineral crusts. The soil remembers the movements of water even when rivers have changed course and civilizations have faded. In the end, the memory of water and soils is both scientific record and human story. It tells of floods that nourished crops, of droughts that tested societies, and of the constant dance between abundance and scarcity. To walk along a riverbank or across a dry plain is to tread on the evidence of water's ancient journeys, stored in the very earth beneath your feet. Soil, in its quiet endurance, ensures that the voices of rivers and rains, of droughts and floods, are never entirely lost. The ground beneath us is more than a record of deep time and ancient climates. It is also keeping track of the present, and in doing so, it is writing the story of our age into its layers. Geologists increasingly use the word Anthropocene to describe the epoch in which human influence has become the dominant force shaping Earth systems. While debate continues over the exact boundaries of this term, there is little question that soil is already bearing the marks of our activity. From plastics to pesticides, from nuclear fallout to heavy metals, our fingerprints are pressed into the Earth itself. Future scientists digging into the layers will be able to read the memory of our time just as clearly as we read the ashes of ancient volcanoes, or the pollen of vanished forests. One of the most striking markers of our era is plastic. These synthetic polymers, once celebrated as miracles of modern convenience, have now infiltrated nearly every environment on Earth. Tiny fragments known as microplastics are turning up in soils around the world, carried by wind, water and waste. They are mixed into farm fields through fertilizers, deposited on mountaintops by rain, and even found in remote Antarctic soils. Unlike organic matter, which decomposes, plastics persist for centuries, perhaps longer. In future soil profiles, these fragments will likely stand out as clear markers of the Anthropocene. Just as layers of volcanic ash help date past eruptions, layers peppered with plastic may one day be used to identify the 21st century. Chemicals are another indelible part of this story. Modern agriculture has relied heavily on synthetic fertilizers and pesticides, which alter soil chemistry in measurable ways. Elevated levels of nitrogen and phosphorus, far beyond natural background levels, are being written into soils worldwide. These nutrient surpluses promote algal blooms in waterways and alter microbial communities underground. The excess is not temporary. It leaves lasting imprints that scientists will be able to detect long after the chemicals themselves have dissipated. Where ancient soils remember the slow enrichment of floodplains, modern soils may be remembered for the sudden surges of synthetic nutrients that defined industrial farming. Heavy metals also record our presence. Lead from gasoline and industry, mercury from mining, and cadmium from manufacturing have been absorbed into soils in vast quantities. In urban areas, soils often contain elevated concentrations of these pollutants, reflecting decades of emissions. Even though many uses of lead and mercury have declined, their legacy remains in the ground. Soil does not simply forgive and forget. It stores these metals, holding on to them as a reminder of human industry. In some places, the levels are so high that they threaten health, a memory of pollution that continues to shape daily life. Perhaps the clearest global marker of the Anthropocene comes from the atomic age. Beginning in the mid-20th century, nuclear weapons testing released radioactive isotopes into the atmosphere. These isotopes, including cesium-137 and plutonium-239, settled back to Earth, embedding themselves in soils around the globe. Their appearance is so sudden, widespread, and precise that many scientists propose them as the defining signal of the Anthropocene. Dig into soils laid down in the 1950s, and you will find these isotopes almost everywhere, a radioactive bookmark signaling humanity's arrival as a planetary force. Unlike pollen or charcoal, these are not natural products of climate or fire. They are uniquely human, unmistakable evidence of our technological age. The reach of soil memory in the Anthropocene is not limited to pollution. Our physical reshaping of landscapes is also deeply inscribed. Vast tracts of land have been ploughed, mined, paved, and terraced. Urban soils often contain layers of concrete dust, brick fragments, and industrial byproducts. Even where cities have been abandoned, these artificial layers persist, telling the story of human settlement. Open-pit mines, landfills, and reservoirs all leave behind distinctive soil profiles, shaped as much by bulldozers as by natural forces. In some cases, these alterations are so extensive that entirely new soil types, called technosols, have been classified by scientists. These are soils whose properties are dominated by human-made materials, rubble, slag, plastics, and chemicals. They are unmistakable products of the Anthropocene. Another sign of our influence lies in the global spread of species. As humans transport plants and animals across continents, the soils adjust. Earthworms introduced to North America from Europe, for example, have transformed forest soils, consuming leaf litter and altering nutrient cycles. Soil microbial communities shift as invasive plants take root, changing the underground ecosystem. In this way, even the living memory of soil, its bacteria and fungi, is being reshaped by human movement and trade. These changes, though less visible than plastics or radiation, are equally enduring. They show that the Anthropocene is not just a story of chemistry, but also of biology written into the ground. Archaeologists of the future will likely find our soils both fascinating and troubling. They will see the rapid rise of pollutants, the sudden spread of synthetic materials, and the unmistakable mark of nuclear isotopes. They will also see evidence of urban expansion, industrial farming, and global trade. Compared to the slow, patient changes of past epochs, the Anthropocene will stand out as a time of abrupt shifts, packed into just a few decades. To those future eyes, the soil record may look less like a gradual diary and more like a bold, erratic scrawl across the planet. It is tempting to see this only as a grim story, but there are hopeful chapters as well. Soils can be restored, and in some places they already are. Organic farming, regenerative practices, and rewilding projects enrich soil rather than deplete it. Efforts to reduce plastic use and clean up pollutants will leave their own signatures in the soil record. If we are remembered for pollution, perhaps we can also be remembered for recovery, for choosing to heal the very ground that sustains us. Soil is forgiving if given the chance, and its memory, while long, is not entirely inflexible. There is a striking poetry in realizing that our everyday lives are now being etched into the earth. A plastic wrapper, a plume of smoke, a nuclear test, a farm field spread with fertilizer, all of these have left marks that will outlast us. Soil is patient, impartial, and precise. It does not care whether our legacy is admirable or reckless. It will simply remember. The Anthropocene is still unfolding, and its story is still being written, but the ground beneath us already holds the first chapters, written in microplastics, heavy metals, and radioactive particles. One day those chapters will be read by others, perhaps by scientists, perhaps by descendants, perhaps by beings we cannot imagine, and what they will see is that soil, as always, has remembered faithfully. It will carry the memory of our age long after the cities have crumbled, the industries have quieted, and the people themselves have passed. Beneath every field, meadow, and forest floor lies a secret archive more astonishing than fossils or charcoal. Hidden in the soil is a vast collection of seeds, tiny packages of life that have fallen year after year, generation after generation, and slipped quietly into the ground. Many never sprout immediately. Instead, they wait, tucked away in a state of dormancy, suspended between past and future. This underground seed bank is one of the soil's most remarkable memories, storing the potential of ecosystems long vanished and carrying them forward for centuries, sometimes even millennia. Seeds are designed for survival. Each one is a miniature time capsule, containing an embryo and a store of nutrients wrapped in a protective coat. Some germinate quickly when conditions are right, but others are built for patience. They can remain dormant through years of drought, floods, fires, or grazing, only stirring to life when light, temperature, and moisture align. The strategy may seem wasteful. Why not grow immediately? But dormancy is a hedge against uncertainty, a way of spreading risk across generations. By lying in wait, seeds ensure that plants can persist, even when surface conditions change dramatically. Soil seed banks vary tremendously in size and composition. In a square metre of fertile meadow soil, there may be tens of thousands of viable seeds, representing dozens or even hundreds of plant species. Forest soils often hold fewer seeds, but they still maintain reserves that can regenerate vegetation after disturbance. Wetlands, deserts, and even tundra all have their hidden collections, each tailored to the rhythms of their environment. The seed bank is like a genetic library buried beneath our feet, one that ecosystems can draw upon in times of need. Some seeds have lifespans that seem almost magical. The seeds of lotus plants have been found viable after more than 1,000 years in dry lake beds. In Israel, a date palm seed recovered from a 2,000-year-old archaeological site was successfully germinated in the early 21st century, producing a living descendant of trees that once shaded ancient settlements. Arctic tundra soils have yielded seeds preserved in permafrost for tens of thousands of years, some of which scientists have coaxed back into growth. Each case is a reminder that the soil is not just a graveyard of fallen plants, but a vault of possibilities, holding on to life long after it was first scattered. The soil seed bank also preserves the memory of ecosystems that have shifted or disappeared. In landscapes transformed by agriculture, patches of soil often still contain seeds from the wild vegetation that once thrived there. Abandoned fields can burst into bloom with native plants as seeds, lying dormant for decades, suddenly find space and sunlight. In wetlands drained and later restored, seed banks often provide the first wave of recovery, bringing back species that had been absent from the surface for generations. The soil remembers what once grew there, and, when conditions allow, offers it back. Fire, too, is part of this story. Some seeds are adapted specifically to germinate after fire, their hard coats cracked by heat, or their dormancy broken by smoke. In chaparral and savanna ecosystems, fires that seem devastating to the eye actually unlock the soil's hidden seed reserves, prompting explosions of wildflowers and shrubs. The flames clear the surface, but the soil's memory ensures that life returns, sometimes more vibrant than before. Even human history is written into the seed bank. Archaeologists studying ancient settlements often analyze soil for preserved seeds, which reveal what crops were grown and what wild plants surrounded the fields. Charred seeds from cooking fires may survive for thousands of years, while buried seeds in abandoned soils can reveal lost agricultural practices. In this sense, the seed bank is not only ecological, but also cultural, holding the memory of human interaction with plants. Modern science uses seed banks in a more deliberate way. Global seed vaults, such as the Svalbard Global Seed Vault in Norway, mimic the soil strategy on a grand scale, storing duplicates of the world's crops in cold, dry conditions. These collections are insurance policies for agriculture, ensuring that genetic diversity survives disasters, disease, or climate change. Yet nature has been running its own seed banks far longer, burying and protecting diversity in the soil itself. The seed bank also complicates efforts at ecological restoration. Invasive species can linger in soils long after they are removed from the surface. Their seeds wait patiently, ready to sprout the moment conditions favour them. This means that managing landscapes often requires not only dealing with visible plants, but also with the hidden seed reservoir beneath. It is a reminder that the soil's memory can sometimes work against human intentions, offering back species we might rather forget. Still, the persistence of seeds is one of nature's most hopeful features. In urban areas, cracked pavements, and abandoned lots often sprout with plants whose seeds have been lying dormant in the soil below. After landslides, floods, or volcanic eruptions, seed banks provide the first sparks of regrowth. The soil does not need to be told how to recover. It already carries the instructions within its buried library. On a deeper level, the existence of seed banks reminds us of the resilience of life. Plants do not rely on certainty. They cast their future into the wind, the water, and the soil, knowing that some seeds will fail, others will wait, and a few will seize the perfect moment to grow. Soil collects these scattered chances, holding them safely until conditions change. It is memory expressed not in fossils or isotopes, but in living potential. There is something quietly poetic in the thought that under every step we take, countless seeds are waiting, silent but ready. A field may look empty in winter, but beneath the frost seeds sleep in the soil, some destined to rise in spring, others perhaps centuries later. The ground is never just what it seems. It is both present and future, a living archive of what has been and what may yet return. The soil seed bank is more than a curiosity of ecology. It is a reminder of continuity, of how life persists through cycles of abundance and scarcity, disturbance and calm. It is the Earth's way of keeping options open, ensuring that no single drought, fire or flood can erase everything. As long as seeds remain buried, the memory of past ecosystems endures, ready to be awakened. In the end, the soil beneath us is not simply a surface to walk on, but a library of life in waiting. Seeds buried centuries ago may one day germinate, carrying the voices of lost landscapes back into the present. To appreciate the soil's seed bank is to see time itself at work in the ground, a patient storehouse of resilience and renewal. It is a memory both fragile and powerful, one that tells us that even in the quietest, barest earth, the future is always lying just below the surface, waiting for its moment to grow. Soil is often dismissed as background, something ordinary and unremarkable, a brown blur beneath our feet. Yet when considered with patience, it becomes something far greater, a living manuscript, fragile and enduring, that holds the memory of Earth itself. It is both humble and immense, both fleeting and timeless. To reflect on soil is to enter into a conversation with the planet's most patient historian. Everywhere you look, soil is layered with meaning. A handful of earth is not just dirt, it is a condensation of centuries. The crumbled fragments of mountains, the remains of ancient forests, the ash of old fires, the spores of microbes, and the seeds of future generations all meet in its grains. Soil is an autobiography, written not by one author, but by countless voices, geological, biological, and human. It is memory made physical, the Earth's recollection scattered in particles too small to notice until we stop and look closely. In a way, soil embodies a paradox. It is immensely fragile, vulnerable to erosion, exhaustion, and neglect. A single storm can strip away what took centuries to form, yet at the same time, soil endures. Layers buried beneath new deposits can persist for tens of thousands of years, intact diaries of vanished worlds. This duality, fragility paired with longevity, makes soil poetic. It reminds us that the most essential foundations of life are also the most precarious. Philosophers and poets have long intuited this. The Roman poet Virgil, in his Georgics, wrote with reverence about the farmer's relationship with the earth, noting that to till soil was to engage with a force both generous and capricious. In Chinese traditions, the element of earth was one of the 5 fundamental phases, embodying stability and nourishment. Indigenous cultures across the world have described soil as mother, as ancestor, as spirit, a being that both sustains and remembers. These metaphors are not accidental. They arise from a recognition that soil is not simply material, but story. Consider burial. The act of returning bodies to the earth is not just practical, it is symbolic of continuity. Soil accepts us at the end, just as it nurtures us throughout life. It becomes the ultimate archive of human presence, enfolding bones, ashes, and memories into its layers. In this sense, soil does not only preserve natural history, it preserves us. It is the final page of every human story, written not in ink but in loam. There is also something profoundly democratic about soil. Mountains and monuments may crumble, but soil absorbs the remains of all things without hierarchy. The leaf and the emperor, the insect and the poet, all return to the same ground. Soil blends them together, erasing boundaries while preserving essence. It is both equalizer and conserver, a place where the distinctions of power fade but the reality of existence endures. At the same time, soil is a reminder of connection. The ground beneath one's feet is not isolated, it is linked to rivers, winds, and skies. Dust lifted from one continent may settle on another, enriching soils thousands of miles away. Charcoal from a fire in antiquity may mingle with pollen from distant forests. When you hold a pinch of earth, you're holding a piece of a vast interconnected system that binds the planet together. The poetic soil is therefore also a cosmopolitan soil, carrying whispers from everywhere. To think of soil as memory is also to recognize its voice in silence. It does not shout its stories, it buries them quietly. Its pages are not written in lines but in horizons, in layers of ash, in traces of phosphorus, in the pollen of vanished plants. Reading soil requires patience, humility, and imagination. It requires listening to what is faint but enduring. There is a lesson in this, that not all memory is loud, and that sometimes the most lasting testimonies are the ones spoken softly. Soil also reflects the rhythms of time differently than we do. Human memory is short, often measured in decades or centuries at most. Soil remembers in scales that dwarf us. It can carry the echoes of ice ages, the imprint of fires long before our ancestors walked upright, the DNA of animals extinct before written language existed. To engage with soil is to stretch our sense of time outward, to recognise that we are brief guests in a story far older and far longer than our own. Yet soil is not only a backward-looking memory, it also holds futures. Seeds buried in the soil may wait centuries for the chance to rise. Microbes adjust to new conditions, preparing ecosystems for what is to come. Even human interventions, from Terra Preta in the Amazon to modern soil restoration projects, show how soil can carry deliberate legacies forward. The ground beneath us is not just a book of what has been, but also a notebook of what may be written next. There is beauty too in soil's textures and scents. The rich smell after rain, known as petrichor, comes from microbial compounds released into the air, a sensory memory of the ground itself. The feel of soil between fingers connects us directly to the cycles of decay and renewal. These sensory experiences are reminders that memory is not abstract but physical, lived through the senses as much as through thought. In our age, the Anthropocene, soil has become a mirror for our choices. Plastics, pesticides, and nuclear isotopes have entered its layers, marking our presence in ways that future generations will read as clearly as we read volcanic ash or glacial deposits. The poetic soil therefore carries a note of warning. Memory is impartial. It records abundance and destruction alike. The ground beneath us will faithfully remember what we have done, whether it is enrichment or degradation. Yet even in this there is hope. Soil has shown time and again that it can regenerate if given care. Abandoned fields can bloom again, scarred lands can heal, and carbon can be locked away in fertile earth. The soil's patience is long and its resilience is deep. To treat it with respect is to inscribe a different kind of memory, one of restoration and renewal. Ultimately, soil invites reflection not only on the Earth's history but also on our place within it. To stand on the ground is to stand on memory, to be supported by countless generations of life and death. It is to recognise that we are part of a cycle, not apart from it. Soil is fragile, enduring, silent and eloquent all at once. It is poetry written in particles, a living testament that connects past, present and future. To call soil poetic is not to romanticize it, but to acknowledge its depth. It is both the humblest of substances and the grandest of archives. It is what clings to boots, yet it is also what carries the memory of worlds long gone. To appreciate soil is to learn humility, that beneath every step lies a story far greater than our own, a memory of Earth itself, fragile and enduring, quietly keeping watch over time. Beneath every step lies a world that is far from inert. Soil may appear quiet, a passive surface upon which life plays out, but in truth it is alive with memory, constantly writing, rewriting, and storing the stories of Earth. It is a living archive, one that does not rest. To end a journey through its many forms of remembrance is to recognise soil not only as a witness to the past, but also as a participant in the present and a custodian of the future. The memory of soil is vast. It holds the chemical traces of ancient rains and droughts, the pollen of forests that have long since disappeared, and the DNA of mammoths, bison, and countless other creatures. It remembers fires in flecks of charcoal, volcanic eruptions in pale ash bands, and human settlement in phosphorus, pottery fragments, and discarded seeds. Its horizons are pages that can be read with care, each one filled with the handwriting of time. This memory is not static. It is constantly being updated, overwritten and layered. but rarely is it erased completely. Soil carries the echoes of what has been, even as it incorporates the debris of what is, yet soil is not merely a passive container, it is alive in the most literal sense. Billions of microbes teem within a handful, weaving networks of exchange and resilience. Fungi stretch filaments like threads of memory, linking roots across entire forests. Seeds lie dormant for centuries, ready to rise when conditions change. These living components of soil are themselves part of its memory, storing not only information about the past but also the potential for renewal. When a field lies fallow and later blooms, or when a forest regrows after fire, it is the living memory of the soil that makes recovery possible. In this way, soil does not simply remember the past, it actively shapes the present. Agriculture, the foundation of human civilization, depends entirely on soil's ability to nurture and sustain. Cities rise where fertile floodplains once welcomed crops. Societies flourish or falter depending on how they treat the earth beneath them. The memory of over-farming, erosion and exhaustion is written into soils as surely as the memory of abundance. To walk across any landscape today is to walk on choices made long before, choices recorded by the soil and carried forward into the present moment. Soil also carries us into the future. The seed banks hidden beneath the surface, the microbial adaptations etched into its communities, the resilience embedded in its very structure, all of these are promises for tomorrow. Even in damaged lands, the soil holds potential for restoration, provided it is given care and time. The memory of what once grew there lingers, ready to be awakened. This is why soil is not only a book of history but also a book of possibility. It holds the outlines of what could return, and in doing so it shapes the future. In our age, the Anthropocene, the memory of soil is also becoming a mirror. Plastics, pollutants, radioactive isotopes, and industrial signatures are now part of its layers. These will endure for millennia, marking our presence with clarity. Soil remembers impartially, storing both our achievements and our mistakes. Yet in this impartiality lies a chance for reflection. If the ground beneath us is already remembering what we do, then we have an opportunity to decide what kind of story we want to leave written there. Soil will not choose for us, but it will preserve the choices we make. There is something humbling in knowing that the earth beneath our feet is alive in this way. It is not only a foundation but also a partner, one that holds memory more faithfully than we ever could. Our own histories are fragile, easily lost to fire, flood, or forgetfulness. Soil is more patient. It does not forget easily, and it carries forward what we leave behind with quiet persistence. In that patience lies wisdom. Poets and philosophers have long intuited this truth. To return to the soil at life's end, to call it mother, to treat it as sacred. These cultural gestures reflect an understanding that soil is more than matter. It is memory embodied, the meeting point of death and life, decay and renewal. The science of soil does not contradict this intuition, it deepens it. Microbes recycling the past, seeds lying in wait, isotopes recording the skies, all of it affirms that soil is indeed the keeper of Earth's memory. To close this journey is not to shut the book, but to recognize that the book continues. Beneath you, even now, soil is remembering today's rainfall, today's footprints, today's pollen drifting from nearby plants. It will carry those traces forward, layering them among the countless others it already holds. Someday, perhaps thousands of years from now, someone may uncover that memory and know that you once walked here, that life once thrived here, that this moment mattered. Soil is fragile, yes, easily lost to erosion, carelessness or neglect. But it is also enduring, capable of preserving the voices of climates, creatures, and cultures long past. To see it as living memory is to see ourselves as part of a longer story, one in which every action, every harvest, every footprint leaves a trace. The living soil beneath us is not only history written quietly in layers, it is also a present moment, buzzing with life and a future waiting patiently for its chance. It is archive, witness, and promise. And in that layered identity lies something profoundly comforting. The earth remembers, not in words or monuments, but in loam and clay, in charcoal and seed, in the enduring living memory beneath our feet. Soil is not simply the ground we walk upon, nor just the medium that nourishes roots. It is something far greater, a vast and patient memory. Within its layers are the traces of rain and drought, the quiet residues of fire and flood, the pollen of vanished forests, the DNA of animals no longer alive, and the seeds of plants still waiting to awaken. It is both archive and witness, holding the weight of human footprints, as well as the marks of glaciers, volcanoes, and the passage of time itself. To look at soil closely is to see that it remembers without judgment. It keeps the story of abundance alongside the story of loss, the legacies of civilizations alongside the whispers of microbes. It holds myths, symbols, and rituals as surely as it holds isotopes and minerals. It is fragile enough to be stripped away in a single storm, and yet enduring enough to preserve voices from millennia past. As this journey through soil's hidden memory comes to a close, one truth lingers. The ground is not inert. It is alive, layered, and ongoing. It remembers the past, shapes the present, and carries within it the possibility of countless futures. Beneath our feet, the story of Earth is still being written, quietly and patiently, grain by grain. And perhaps the most calming reminder of all is this. While human lives rush forward in fleeting spans of years, the soil endures, keeping the world's memory safe. To stand on the earth is to stand on history, to be part of its present, and to add a line to the story that will continue long after us.